Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. You're in for a real treat this afternoon, this evening, this morning, guests. Today I am joined by Joshua Bandoch. Josh is a persuasion expert. He is a keynote speaker and a communications strategist. He spent over 2 decades studying how people influence, persuade, and move others to action. He's worked as a speechwriter, a communications advisor to senior leaders, consulted across multiple industries, and spoken at national, international events, including a TED Talk on persuasion. Josh is also the author of the book, How to Get What You Want, Mastering the Art and Science of Persuasion. Josh and I actually share a common interest in not just focusing on the theory of persuasion, but what actually happens when the rubber meets the road. So I think we're in for a real treat today. I've done a lot of research, and everything points to a very exciting, intriguing conversation. So Josh, welcome to Empathy at the Table.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really excited, Tony.
Excellent. So Josh, let's just kick off for people who may not know who you are. I know you're growing in popularity. I know that because every time now I put your name in Google and you seem to appear everywhere. So that's a good thing. But for those who maybe haven't heard of you and the area of your expertise, could you maybe just land a little bit and share your interest and how you got into this whole world of persuasion and influence?
So I'm really interested in persuasion. And for me, persuasion is the difference between having a good idea and having others embrace it. And throughout my personal and professional life, I've seen people sometimes have really amazing ideas, and there's just that something missing, and it's how we talk about things. So whether it's in your personal lives, or you're trying to sell something, or I do some work in the policy space, whatever it is that you're trying to sell, how we talk about things matters tremendously. And I think I didn't appreciate this fully in my first life as an academic, because academics, they're really smart. I'm not sure that they're terribly persuasive, because a lot of what they do is actually backwards if you're trying to persuade somebody. And I should probably define a little bit what I mean by the term too, to kind of frame our conversation. What is persuasion? Because this is also kind of how I've come to this book, is really trying to figure out what it is. So I'll first talk about what it's not. Persuasion is not about winning, because Tony, if I win against you, what does that make you?
A loser.
A loser. It's terrible. So that's no good. And we think that persuasion is about convincing somebody to think like us. And the problem with that is that the Latin root of the word convince actually means to vanquish or to conquer. And conquest is barbaric. It's not persuasive. And then we think, getting back to the academic thing, that persuasion is all about logic and reason. And that's what I was trained to do. And the reality of this, of everyone's brains, this is what all the neuroscience say, is that we feel first, then reason. It's like, oh. And so kind of part of what I've come to this book is just lots of experience, lots of research, kind of not just seeing what doesn't work, but then kind of checking the neuroscience on it and trying to understand why things do and don't work, and suspending judgment as well, and just observing these things.
Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit, because I really like your body of work and I really want to explore it. And I want to bring as many people along with us as possible. And so I don't want to lose anybody when we start talking about persuasion, because there'll be some people who think, well, that sounds a bit manipulative. It sounds a bit Machiavellian. So your body of work looks at the difference between persuasion being a cognitive pursuit or an emotional pursuit. And I wonder whether you'd kind of define, first of all, maybe differentiate between manipulation and persuasion, and then if you could maybe go a little bit deeper into the neurological differences between the cognitive idea of persuasion and then the actual emotional idea of persuasion.
Absolutely. And I should then define what I think persuasion is, because I think that'll help frame this. I think that persuasion is shared action. It's shared because it's something that we voluntarily do with others, and it's action because it's about getting things done. So I get asked this question all the time. It's a great question. Well, aren't you just teaching people manipulation? And it's true that the things that I have in my book and talk about elsewhere, they could be used for evil. It's kind of like the Force, right? Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker. And so why are you doing something? And so I kind of frame it this way. There are mercenary and missionary reasons to not try to manipulate people. The missionary reason is it's the wrong thing to do. Like, do you like it when people manipulate you? Not really. And the mercenary reason is that it's going to catch up with you. People are going to find out. They're going to tell the people, and no one's going to work with you. And maybe you make that deal, just once, you get what you want just that one time, and you don't get it repeatedly. So for me, the shared action idea is that we're building a relationship, and that it's somebody you can go back to time and time and time again to get what you want repeatedly. So manipulation, bad news, don't do that. Instead, share action with somebody. So what are some of these neuroscience things that kind of make it hard? There are a couple. I'll start with, I think, the two most challenging ones. The first one, I don't think we realize it, and yet it's that we are wired to think and talk primarily about ourselves. And it feels good. It generates the same sensations in our brain as sex and money, and it's a survival mechanism. Here's the problem with that. When I'm talking all about me, how does it make you feel? And are you interested necessarily in what I'm saying? You're interested in you. So although we're wired to think about ourselves and we adopt what I call a me first mindset, a much more persuasive way to approach things is to flip the script and put them, your audience, your interlocutor, your partner, whoever it is you're talking to, put them first. And when you can understand them, form an authentic connection, and that goes back to the manipulation side of things. It has to be authentic, right? You want to authentically understand somebody, form a connection with them, and then understand who they are and what they care about, and then try to meet some of those needs while at the same time meeting your own needs. As you start to talk to people, you're going to see that there's way more overlap than you ever thought. Even, the people who seemingly have the most radically different political views, if they talk authentically and honestly and openly with one another, they're going to find overlap, because it's always there, because you're talking to another human being. So we can't see things that differently all the time. You build that trust. So it is in your interest to put them first. It's just that we're wired as a survival mechanism to think about ourselves. The second really big one is that this is what all the neuroscience says, we are wired to feel first, then reason. Sometimes it's feel, then reason. Sometimes it's feel, then reason. And sometimes it's feel, and we never get to reasoning. Like, we've all been there. Like, I sure have. And actually, the research shows that people who have lost the ability to emote through brain damage, that actually impairs their reasoning. So emotions actually support our reasoning process, and yet a lot of people still like to launch their logic at other people and just kind of beat people over the head with their logic. And again, like, has that ever worked on you? Has anybody ever once just, the louder they scream and the more things they throw in your face, their data, their logic, like, has that ever changed your mind? Like, ever? Hasn't changed my mind.
Yeah.
The logic first approach to persuasion, which is what we all think persuasion is actually illogical. It doesn't work, doesn't align with how the brain is wired. You have to start with feelings, because that's how the brain's wired.
Yeah, I totally agree. We in the work I do, we have these 7 principles towards emotionally intelligent negotiation, and the first principle is your counterpart is not your enemy, and just framing it like that. Now, we're not saying your counterpart is your friend. We're just saying that if you frame it as a start point, not seeing them as an enemy, then that gives you access to a completely different set of resources, a different way of approaching the conversation, and so it aligns exactly with the research that you're seeing as well. Josh, you're a speech writer. You've had a lot of experience in speech writing, and I wondered about this, and I wondered when you speech write, you are in the business of influence. So you're in the business of creating some words or creating a communication in order to influence people in a certain way. And I've been teaching communication skills for 15 years, and we always say, start with the end in mind. Are you looking to to move people to action? Are you looking to inspire people? Are you looking to inform people and so on? And so I wonder, when you do your speech writing, do you have a clear process in mind in terms of how you put this together and then how you then create the discourse in order to be able to influence the people who end up being the audience?
Great question. When you're speech writing, much like when you're a consultant for lots of other services, you're serving somebody else. So a speechwriter, when I do that, that's for somebody else. So I did that for a number of high-level government officials. And so it's sort of me trying to understand two things, because there are two thems here, right? There's understanding the audience who is going to hear the speech, and there's also the them who is the principal who's going to deliver the speech. And so what you need is a process to make sure that both of those needs are met. What does the audience need to hear? And is it also something that's going to feel comfortable and authentic for the speaker to deliver? Because I could write a speech that Josh thinks is the best speech in the world. And even if like the ideas are in alignment with the speaker, if the substance of the speech and the style of it doesn't sound like that speaker, they're going to find it really aversive. So like one person for whom I wrote speeches, this person is a like storyteller. Story first, story second, story last. So if a speech wasn't laced with stories throughout the entire speech, this person was uncomfortable with that speech and just said, no, give me something else. So I'd understand that. And then really thinking about what the audience needs. So this is where you put them first, and you're trying to understand what is it exactly that audience needs to hear from you to share action. And that's going to differ. Some of the audiences, if they're a little more academic, maybe they do want a little more of that data. If it's men and women in uniform, well, that's going to be a little bit different because you're going to make different appeals to them. In this case, you might appeal a little bit more to like some patriotic themes because they're probably on average a little bit more patriotic. So you're really analyzing that audience and figuring out who they are and what they care about.
Yeah. A lot of people when I'm teaching, they look up and they say, well, yeah, when you see these people who are naturally good speakers, and you see them on TV and they look fantastic. And I always say, no, there's a whole load of work just that goes behind it. Just like you see an athlete doesn't just rock up and win the gold medal. There's a team behind them. And I just wondered, maybe could you shed a little bit of light on how what that actually looks like when you have to write a speech for somebody, all the practice that goes into making someone look really relaxed and comfortable when they're standing in front of an audience.
Yes, and just to start with, to reemphasize what you said, which is that nobody is just born a great speaker and can go up and just deliver those epic speeches. You think about some of the most compelling speakers in America the last 50 years, people who come to mind. JFK, sure, he had great speechwriters and he practiced.
Right.
Martin Luther King Jr., brilliant man, he practiced. That delivery was phenomenal. Ronald Reagan practiced. Barack Obama practiced. So they were extremely mindful that you don't just get up and read something. So what does that process look like? You're trying to get the speaker, first of all, throughout the process, like something that they're comfortable with at the end, but they have to feel comfortable. So there are, generally what this will look like is you'll sit down with the speaker when you know that the speech is coming. Okay, here's the speech, here's the audience, what do you want to say? And then there are one of two processes that are good. Either you want to give them an outline and then have them approve the outline and then go. And then they've approved the speech and you're going to kind of fill in the blanks there. Or you're going to give them a final speech and then they're going to edit that speech. What you don't want, usually, unless it's some epic speech, a State of the Nation, something like that, addressing Parliament, whatever, you don't want to have that back and forth 20 times because then you're going to have 20 drafts and it's just going to kill you. So either get agreement up front, here's the structure, sections 1, 2, 3, or talk about it and then give them this final product, approve or make the changes as you see fit. Those are one of the two processes that generally work pretty well.
Interesting. So let's get back into the science, the neurological science of this. There's something, again, when I was doing the research, you mentioned already two of them that are natural proclivities for humankind, right? Is that we like to talk about ourselves and we lead with emotions. some people will say, no, I'm not emotional. I'm very logical. And you know, I mean, that's been debunked, right? You know,
Yeah.
we look at things based on how we feel. But there was something else I saw in your research, which was we're naturally negative. You know, we naturally think negative. Maybe could you open up on that a little bit?
Yeah, that would be the next one. So then, okay, start with feelings. Okay, maybe reluctantly you're open to that. What kind of feelings? And we are also wired to be negative. If you look, certainly at the news in America, I think it's a little bit worse here. In fact, I think the data show it's a little bit worse here. If you look at some of the cable news stations, you go to their websites, awash in negativity. So you would probably not unreasonably think what emotions are persuasive? Negative emotions. It's how we're wired, so that it makes sense. And again, I would ask, how often is it the case that truly somebody motivates you in the long term by simply making negative appeals and just grinding negatively on your emotions? Not really. And again, some of those speakers that I mentioned before. So when I do workshops or I give talks, I always ask people who are some of the most persuasive Americans of the 20th century. The same names come up. They say JFK. They don't say Walter Mondale. They say Martin Luther King Jr. They don't say Malcolm X. They say Ronald Reagan. They don't say Barry Goldwater. So it's like people kind of know this intuitively that it's these speakers. Why? Because they were positive. They mostly appeal to positive emotions. So it's like, all they were wired to be negative, you have to be positive. And so to do that, you have to be for something. It's fine to see something and say, well, I don't like that because. That's fine. Ultimately, what are you for? Because that's what's going to drive things forward. And by being for something, you are generating positive emotions. So like one thing I'm really passionate about is expanding opportunity. So it's not enough for me to say, oh, well, that barrier to opportunity is bad. No. I have to say, big picture, I am for opportunity. I am for thriving. I am for people unleashing their potential. And so therefore, this barrier impedes that. Let's remove that barrier. But if I'm not for opportunity or thriving or whatever, it doesn't do anything. It's not enough for me to criticize something.
Yeah. And something that it took me down the rabbit hole. I'm not ashamed to admit. You know, I'm a geek for new information around this whole area. Yeah. So when I meet somebody like you and it sends me down a rabbit hole of research and looking at stuff, and I really enjoy the journey. And you came up with something which I had to write it down here because you talked about the parallel between the taste buds, right? The six tastes that we have in our mouth, and the morality taste buds, right? And how that works. And I really love that analogy. I've never heard it before, so I would only butcher it if I attempted. So please, could you share that analogy with us?
Thank you. And credit where it's due. There are some great psychologists who have done this research. So I'll caveat it out with that. So just like we have 5, maybe 6 physical taste receptors on our tongue, they are sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and possibly fat. That's a question mark. Is that a taste bud? And those are largely wired into us. You can cultivate those tastes a little bit, but for the most part, they're there. In the same way, it's kind of how our morals work too. That human beings have 6, probably 7 moral tastes that are kind of on their moral palate, their tongue in a sense, that are wired into us. So I'll say what they are briefly, and then I will reemphasize the wiring part. So they are care, sort of concern for like people being harmed or cared for; equity, which is equality of outcome; proportionality, which is about kind of hard work; loyalty, which is like in group, out group; authority, which is respect for hierarchies; purity, which is like observing when things are disgusting or pure or sacred; and then liberty, which is essentially being free to do things. And two really odd things about this that have been actually liberating for me is that these actually are largely wired into us. They are genetic. 30 to 60% of our morals are genetic, and they know this through studies of twins. So people can chase down the citations in the book, and people hear that like, no, that's crazy. Well, it's also true. So for me, it's been liberating. We all have our political views. As you know, they're wired into us. And Tony, I don't hate you because you are not 2 meters tall with like long red hair, or 1.5 meters tall with like blonde hair. That'd be ridiculous, right? It makes no sense at all. So in the same way, if people's morals are at least a good chunk, maybe even more than 50% wired into them, you don't have to hate them. What you have to do is understand their values and appeal to their values authentically. And that's how you get what you want.
Yeah, you use this beautiful example of, let's say I have a different set of morals to you, and I'm trying to ram my worldview of morality down your throat. It's like going to a vegetarian and saying, "Hey, look, you've got to eat this piece of veal. This is beautiful, right?" I mean, when you explain it as stark as that, it kind of sounds ridiculous, right? You might want to stop and ask the vegetarian, so what kind of diets do you eat? And in the conversation, you may become interested in a vegetarian diet, or you may be at least interested in seeing the world a little bit through their perspective, right? And I guess that's the same thing with morality.
Exactly. And it turns out that, kind of largely speaking, people of different political views, on average, tend to be sensitive to only certain moral taste. So folks who are more on the left of the political spectrum, they are sensitive especially to care and to equity, and then a certain kind of freedom. Folks who are conservative in the American sense, they are sensitive to proportionality. That's the hard work, loyalty, authority, purity, and a somewhat different kind of liberty. And then libertarians, I guess a little bit different over here. Liberal would be the phrase I think that folks in Europe would use to describe a libertarian. They're sensitive only to proportionality and a certain kind of liberty. So what that means is that if a conservative is talking to someone on the left, say a progressive in American parlance, then they literally have different moral taste palettes. And so it's trying to feed that vegetarian veal. It doesn't work. So instead, what do you do for the vegetarian? You say, well, do you like curry dishes? Oh, great. Get curry with like rice and vegetables. Oh, they love that. But don't put chicken in the curry. So you have to really just understand your audience's values, their morals, and then appeal to them. And once you kind of know if somebody's a little bit more on the left, a little bit more on the right politically, you know which things to appeal to that they're going to find tasty as opposed to aversive.
I mean, this is really good information to use, especially in the world I work in. I work in helping leaders and companies navigate difficult conversations, and we're not trained to do this. We're not trained to really understand that. We're trained, as you said, we think about ourselves, we lead with emotions, and we typically tend to think negatively, and this is all a protection mechanism. And so in your book and in the body of work that you do, you talk about rewiring, right? Rewiring yourself and to see the world in a different way. Talk a little bit more about what that process of rewiring looks like, and really how difficult it might be. Or is it easy for you, would you say?
Oh, it's not been easy for me, that's for sure. I frame all of this as follows. Throughout every single day in our personal and our professional lives, we're faced with a decision. Do I want to be right, or do I want to make a difference? Those are totally different things. Being right is really easy. Write that text or email that you're going to wish you hadn't sent. You're going to tweet, blog post, whatever, newsletter, whatever you have. Send it, boom, you were right, easy peasy. Making a difference, that's much harder. And that's about sharing action repeatedly with somebody. Okay, well, if that's what you're after, then how do you rewire yourself to do the things that I'm talking about? It really goes back to flipping the script and thinking about, how would I feel if somebody treated me this way? How would I feel if I'm talking to somebody and they make it all about them and I'm just invisible there? How would I feel if somebody's beating me over the head with their logic? How would I feel if someone is trying to wear me down with their negativity? How would I feel if somebody is trying to beat me over the head with their values when they don't align with my values? It's going to be terrible. So it's like, it's sort of using, like, putting them first, right? What's like, also, if you are the them there, how would you feel if people do these things to you? And so there is a part of our wiring, if we kind of point that way and we kind of pull on this circuit and point things there, that I think allows us to do this simply, not easily. These are totally different things. Basketball is a simple game. Throw a ball through a hoop. How easy is it? Totally different. I don't know. Ask
Yeah.
Michael Jordan and Steph Curry and all those people. LeBron James. It is not easy. It is simple though.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that analogy. So I'm curious about the world in which you do your work, right? I'm curious about the environment, the people you interact with on a day-to-day basis. And, are you in an echo chamber where everybody thinks and feels the way you do and believes in what you believe in? Or do you, bump up against different worldviews? And how does that work?
Different worldviews for sure, in a lot of ways. So one of the spaces where I work is the policy space. I do the communications and persuasion stuff, but also I'm a policy advocate. And the thing that I care most about is empowering people to unleash their potential. So policies that will expand potential, I think they're amazing. And policies that restrict potential, well, I would like to see those things changed. Okay. So that said, like whatever political environment you're working in, some people are going to think like you, and some people aren't going to think like you. And so, what you're trying to do is you're first trying to share some observations. So, I can give you two examples. Talk about barriers to opportunity. In America, we have something called occupational licensing, which is a government permission slip to work in a particular industry. So it's like, okay, well, we know through data that about 1 in 4 Americans need an occupational license. And we know through data also that this does obviously restrict people's ability to work in industries. That's exactly what it's meant to do. People need jobs, right? Unemployment, we'd like it to be lower, like people to have more jobs. So as you can start to share some of these observations with people, you can say, well, this is a barrier to work, okay? And once you're sort of agreeing on some of those things, how you appeal to people is going to be a little bit different. So if I'm talking to somebody on the left, remember they are sensitive to claims of care and harm. I would talk about how this policy is inequitable, it's against equity, and it's uncaring, how it hurts certain groups of people more than others. So the data show that Blacks and Hispanics in America are hurt more by this. So I can say authentically that these groups are hurt more. Whereas if I'm talking to like a libertarian or conservative, they're going to be more resonant to claims about hard work and proportionality and freedom and things like that. So I would say, well, this policy infringes on somebody's ability to work in an industry. That's unfair, and it restricts their freedom. So this is not good. So I'm still advocating for the same thing, removing a barrier to opportunity, and how I frame that changes, and it remains authentic because the data do show that it impacts some groups more than it impacts other groups. And it is a restriction on somebody's freedom. So within that, based on who I'm talking to, I'm going to frame things.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, you and I are literally on the, we're on the same side of the table in this conversation. But I think it's important that we say this is not easy, right? It sounds, when you hear people talking about it, it sounds, yeah, okay, great, let's just go and do this, right? But when you are under pressure,
Yeah.
and as you said, when the emotions kick in, which oftentimes they do, then all of this theory that we talk about and all these steps, it kind of goes out of the window. And I just wondered, do you have any tips that people can do what they know rather than know what they do, right? So when that cloud comes over and they get the amygdala hijack, what tips do you have for them to traverse that area?
I would say two sets of things. The first is getting your mind and your body ready to engage. So there's something called the physiological sigh. This guy named Andrew Huberman, some of your listeners will have heard of him. Kind of a popular podcaster in the US. He's really made this famous. It goes like this. Just this actually reduces stress in your system. Try that.
You took 2 breaths in. Was it 2
Yeah,
you take in? Right. Through your nose.
Breathe out through your mouth. So that's just something that like anybody can do when you're in a stressful situation. Breathe. Do like 5 of those. You will like feel different. Okay. And then ask yourself, is now the right time to engage? So, suppose that you are like in a heated conversation with your partner, right? It's like, I have a wife, sometimes we disagree about things. And what I've tried to be mindful to do is just say, okay, hang on. we're going to temporarily disengage because this is not going to be fruitful. So if you're feeling like you can't engage fruitfully and you have a say over the matter, just say, I'm going to take a little breather, go for a walk, whatever, but don't go in red hot because it's never going to go well because of the emotions. They're going to bubble over in a way that's unhelpful. This isn't like the emotion of like, I am so overjoyed. Woo, right? This is like, I don't know. Okay. So decide if now is the right time to engage. If it is, then you've got to do your very best to just trust your training. And that's what I try to give people in the book is to train. So really, really put them first. Really try to authentically understand them because that's going to form a connection. And if you let people even just talk, they feel hurt. And don't underestimate how insanely powerful that is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then be likable because it's really easy when you're upset to not be likable. And there's a chapter in the book called Go Beyond Words. And sometimes what we say is as little as 7% of how people experience us. So it's like, well, be likable because if somebody dislikes you, you go in there and they want to agree with you. And they just can't bring themselves to because they're finding you so aversive.
Yeah,
Be
yeah.
likable. So trying to do at least those two things, listen and be likable, start there and be mindful of their feelings. Suspend judgment as much as you can and
Yeah,
just try to
yeah.
observe how they're seeing the world. Because unless you think they're an absolute, just like irrational maniac, you know, people have good insights. Even if
Yeah.
it's in a political issue that's just so spicy hot, it's like, well, unless you think they're just completely insane, maybe they have a point. Understand what that is. Let them feel hurt.
I mean, this is such a great point. I love what you just said, that you, maybe everything you're saying makes perfect sense, but I just don't like you, right? And so therefore, even if I want to agree, that irrational part of my brain will scupper the deal, will walk away just because I don't like you. So something as simple as being likable. And the other way round, if you are likable, then we can work together to make a deal that I don't like, something that I do like. We can work together on that, right? If you are likable.
And 100%. And when you are likable and nice to people, so many doors open and so many
Mm.
conversations become a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
So just in the last, I guess, 2 weekends ago, I had to call my cell phone provider for a couple of things. I get my service through Verizon, and I know that these customer service agents, they get beat up all day long. So people call and they're upset about things that, like, obviously it's this customer agent's fault that my internet's not working, that my phone's not working, that
Right,
I have,
right.
right? It makes no sense at all. So I get that they get beat up all day long. And I've even asked people, I'm like, man, it must be so hard. Like, oh my God, people just call and they scream at me. So I bring some empathy to those conversations and I kind of joke around with them and I try to be super likable. So in the span of 3 days, I had to call them about two little tiny issues. And after about 15, 20 minutes, when the person really helpfully resolved my issue, they said, oh, do you want me to look on your account to see if there are any deals? And I said, oh, sure, why not? And so first lady, she found a deal on my account where I could upgrade from my old iPhone 13 to an iPhone 17 at no charge to me. Because I had just called a few months ago and I said, oh, any deals on my account? Nope. But this person, so okay, I knew where to go for the deals. Cool. Okay. New phone. And then I had to call 2 days later and she said, oh, again, same thing, different person, super nice to them. And she said, do you want me to look for any deals on your account? I said, hey, fire away. So it turns out my wife is also eligible for an upgrade from an iPhone 15 to a 17, and her 15 was working great, and she can keep her 15. They didn't have to do that. They could have said, sir, thank you. Have I resolved your issue? Cool. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
was likable and super nice to them. We got
Yeah.
two new iPhones literally at no charge to us.
What something that shone through when I was doing again looking into you and your body of work was what you said was your North Star, and what's interesting was you brought it up, not me, right? I had it as one of the points I wanted to bring up, and so this shows to me that these are your true values because you unsolicited, you actually said it word for word because I wrote it down to make sure. Your North Star is to empower people to unleash their unique potential, right? And I mean, that's what guides you. That's your guiding star. How How does that work for you, right? How does it work for you in sticky situations when you come up with people who maybe don't have their North Star as clearly defined as you, and the natural propensity is for you to get frustrated? How does that actually help you in those interactions?
Well, if so, maybe two situations. If I were maybe a consultant kind of for this person or just talking to them, I would want to help them figure out what that is because it's really important. And we all need that clarity. So there's a chapter in the book on vision. And vision is what animates action. It is what animates action in our personal lives and our professional lives, whether we are an individual contributor or the president and CEO of a company or whatever. That's what animates action. So, what is your vision for your life, professionally and personally? And really trying to get clarity on that because it's a beautiful thing when you
Yeah.
get that clarity. So, when I talk to interns, I do this little exercise where I say, okay, close your eyes and pretend that you're real close to the end of your time on this earth. I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to be able to tell yourself that your life, that was worth it. Boom, quick intuitive. You
Yeah.
know what that includes and they know right away. Okay, cool. We're going to reverse engineer into that. And the amazing thing is it's not only job stuff. It's I want a family, these sorts of things. Okay, cool. You already know your North Star at the age of 20. Cool. Like, so let's reverse the next 60, 70 years to make sure that those things that you find meaningful, that are going to really give you gratitude in your life, that we build your next 60 years around that. So it's just helping people, it's asking those questions, helping people just understand what that is and understanding what they care about. So part of it is that I lead with those things. When we talked about being for something, I'm for opportunity, I'm for empowerment, I'm for thriving. And I try to also just kind of model that when I'm talking about things. And I'm not only against things and I'm not only data and whatever. It's so trying to model this a little bit in my own work.
Yeah. Tell us about the How to Get What You Want, Mastering the Art and Science of Persuasion. Who did you write it for?
Well, I wrote it especially for people who are trying to climb the ladder and get to that next level. And they have great ideas. And it's how they talk about them that is the gap. Maybe you're in sales or business or you're a leader or whatever, and there's something missing. And rarely is it the substance of those ideas. And I've encountered so many people, so many great ideas that stay on a shelf, or people who are just stuck because they're not communicating things the right way. So it's those people who really are just trying to climb that ladder and to take that next step.
Yeah. When I interview people about their books, there's often a big chunk of themselves in the book, right? It's almost like I'm writing to my younger self and all the things I wish that I had known, right, when I was younger. Now I'm putting them in the book for humanity. Is there an element of that in this, or?
That totally. The whole logic stuff. I was in my first life, I was an academic, so I did the PhD thing, whatever, taught at a couple of schools, and you're taught in academia logic, 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 logic. I mean, kind of funny. I guess I kind of knew early on I was an editor for a journal, and it's like all the logic there, but like somehow all these super smart people with all these fancy degrees, their logic looks different. So I guess I should have known that. But you're in these workshops, and people are just alpha, male and female, beating their chest, beating people over the head with their logic, and I was like, I don't know, but that's how I was trained, and so I definitely have made the mistake of just younger me trying to beat people over the head with my logic. And I actually remember one time, this was actually back in college, where I did that in class, and then I talked to a friend afterwards, and a super smart girl, and she said, look, I know you're not a jerk, but oh, oh. So I was
The
like,
B word, the B
yeah,
word.
exactly. So I wish I had known 20 years ago that the logic stuff is great, and it is oftentimes simply supplemental. So start with feelings, and one thing we haven't talked about, probably not time to get too deep into it, but I will say it is to start with story. Because, I was trained, write those long papers, academic papers, policy papers, and look, they're great. But if you could tell somebody either a 30-second story, or you could deliver a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation there is almost no world in which you should do the latter. 99.9% of the times, just tell the story. And I just didn't appreciate those things. So part of the neuroscience for me and why I can say, look, all the neuroscience logically supports these things is that it's been liberating for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Josh, I mean, we could go on for at least another couple of hours, and off camera, you mentioned that you love Barcelona, so
Right.
there's an open invitation
Great.
for you to pop over to Barcelona. I'd love to continue the conversation, but for our listeners who found this equally as engaging as I have, how can they find you? And maybe just tell us one big thing that's really exciting you that you're working on at the moment.
To find me, either go to joshuabandoch.com, just Google how to get what you want, check me out on LinkedIn, connect with me. Those are all good ways to find me, contact me, all the simple standard things. What's one thing I am working on? What I'm really starting to do with this book is to start to help people put this stuff into practice, because the book is a roadmap. And now what I want to do is really sort of help people figure out, okay, in situations now, what do I do? Like, I like these ideas. How do I implement that? Because again, for me, shared action, right? This isn't an academic book about persuasion. It's about helping people get what they want repeatedly. So that's the really exciting part. That's kicking the tires with real world experience and helping people.
Josh Bandoch, I consider you an information geek like myself in this world, and
Guilty as charged.
So it's definitely a conversation I'd love to continue at another occasion. So I'd like to thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Delightful. Thank you, Tony.